Kyle, can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, hey everyone, my name's Kim. Like Kyle said, I live in Denver, Colorado, and I'm a developer advocate at DigitalOcean. And I'm going to. Oh, it looks like I can't share my screen.
Let me. Yeah, absolutely. Let me host you.
Cool.
There you go.
Yeah, I got it now. Thank you. So this is DigitalOcean's homepage. We are a cloud computing service, much smaller, but offers similar things like Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud. And make note, DigitalOcean is special in that we have this really big community side. So if you go to digitalocean.com and you go to this community tab, you go to overview, we have a lot of cool stuff. We offer tech talks every month, and we have tutorials for things like Git. So if you go to tutorials, and if you search Git, you might find some helpful stuff. Like this is what is Git tutorial. So as you're going through the program, especially if you're doing like CLI stuff, server stuff, I suggest going to DigitalOcean and checking out our tutorials or some of the things that we have to offer. So yeah, like Kyle said, I'm a developer advocate. I've been a site reliability engineer, which is a DevOps role. And before that, I was a web developer. But after college, I was a school teacher for 6 years. So I've done the career transition thing before, and it's really hard and it's really exciting. So I'm pumped to talk to you all. Before I get started, I would actually just love to hear about you all. Like, who are you? What were you doing at Ford before this program started? So I'm gonna take a few volunteers to start, and then I'm gonna call on people. So who are you? What were you doing at Ford before this program? So Blair, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I'll go first. Name's Blair. Prior to this program, I was a team lead in the titles department. Immediately prior to that, I was a dealership credit analyst, which is like a loan underwriter for dealerships.
Oh, cool. Thank you. I think, Matt, were you also going to introduce yourself?
Which one? I have two.
Oh, I didn't see that.
We have two Matts.
Matt P, and then the other Matt after.
I'm Matt Paris. I've been with kind of journeyman with Ford Credit. Most recently, I was with the GDMS team. I wasn't quite sure what I was doing over there actually. It was actually a short stint. They hadn't really ramped me up there yet, and then this opportunity came. Prior to that, I was a team leader over at the NRC, over the EDI group there.
Cool, thank you. The other person named Matt. Oh, there you are. I see you.
Name's Matt Craycraft. I was in account services, and I was the primary lead of the generic inbox distributing emails.
Oh, cool. Awesome. All right, I want to hear from like 3 more people.
My name's Kirk Garzon, and before this, I was a dealer service analyst, much like Blair did in dealer credit, except I was working with personal accounts for customers, so a loan underwriter.
Nice.
My name's Lauren.
I
was sorry, I interrupted. I was the West Market area analyst, super long name. I was primarily sending emails to Matt in the generic inbox.
Nice, thank you. Let's do 2 more folks.
Hey, I'm Bryce Jerry. I was also a DSA, so loan underwriter for personal car loans. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Parnell, how about you?
Hello, I'm Parnell. I've been with Ford for 6 years, and before this, I was a funding discrepancy specialist for commercial, so I deal with commercial contracts when they got sent done.
Nice, cool, thank you. Well, in the past when I've been a guest speaker for Kyle or when we worked together, the audience was slightly different. It was people who had decided to go to a commercial like software boot camp, and there was just like a really wide range of prior experiences that the students had. So some students this was like their first educational experience after leaving home. Some people had other careers prior to this, but it sounds like you all were already like really technical and like really doing complicated stuff in Ford. Julie, you're saying no. Tell me more.
No, I've worked in just about every department everybody spoke of, but I think it's more the business center ops is more relationship geared than I think technically geared with our very outdated systems. They're struggled. So not a whole lot of tech involved, I would say.
Well, DOS isn't enough, Julie.
DOS is not enough. No, we still have quite a few DOS-based systems, but we're really, I think a lot of us were motivated to get out of DC Ops to fix what we knew was very much broken within. So that's my personal perspective, and I've worked in a lot of departments and not a whole lot of time, and overall it's broken, I would say, and I think that's why Ford is investing the money, which we're all thankful for.
Awesome, that's great to hear. Cool. Well, I'm gonna just tell you a little bit more about my personal story, and then I'll offer. We'll have time for questions. Like I said, after I graduated from college, I was a teacher. I taught elementary school music for 2 years, and then I also taught elementary school special education for 4 years. And kind of like what Julie said, one way I got sort of passively interested in software development was when I was a special education teacher. We had to use this software to create these documents called individual education plans. And I used to live in Milwaukee, and I used their system for a while, and that system was actually just a PDF that you could edit, which was great because you saw the document as it was going to be printed, how it would look when you gave it to parents. It was easy to save and easy to make changes to. And then I moved to Fort Collins, Colorado, and that school district had purchased a different system for writing those IEPs, and it was so bad. It was you had to like turn on spell check, and just the way the form looked on the web was very different than the way it looked when it was printed off. And I remember thinking like, I bet this could be made better. And I understand like government contract stuff makes a lot of like getting good software complicated. I understand that now anyway. But that was a thing that just kind of got in my head. I didn't know, I wasn't like, and now I'm going to become a software developer. So after 4 years of teaching special ed, I was really burned out. During the summers, I was working for Teach for America, which is this alternative teacher training program, and I ended up doing a lot of instructional coaching and curriculum design, and I realized I did enjoy education, especially adult education. But in spite of that, I was like, I can't be in the classroom anymore. It's too hard for me. I can't do this till I retire. So I applied for a bunch of jobs for several months and didn't get like any calls back. And I had a friend at the time who knew I was struggling, being unemployed, not wanting to go back into teaching, and said like, hey, have you heard about these software bootcamp things? This was in 2015, so they were kind of new at that point. I was like, no, what's that? And I looked into one, and I did a try JavaScript like course in the browser that I thought was cool. And ultimately, I went to this boot camp, and that's where I met Kyle. So the boot camp was called Galvanize. That's where I ended up working afterward. But it was interesting because when I was a student at the boot camp, I had just come from observing instructors in their classrooms and giving them feedback and trying to help them make the experience better for their students. And it was so bad. The class I took at Galvanize, like teachers didn't have any tools beyond just straight lecturing, which was really hard. They weren't able to differentiate for different students who were, sometimes you get something really fast and sometimes you don't. They had no way of like accommodating that spread of students. And so I started giving them notes like, hey, like, why don't you try this? Here's a technique that might be helpful. And so after I graduated, I ended up getting hired on being an instructional coach at Galvanize. I did that for like a year and a half, but I told my boss at the time, like, hey, I like this job. I'm good at it. I've done this job before, but I did the course in order to be technical. So he helped me get onto a technical team, which was Kyle's instructional team in Denver. And that's sort of how that went. So, And then after that, so I taught at Galvanize for a few years, and I actually don't do web development anymore. I do DevOps stuff, system stuff, and when I was teaching at Galvanize, I noticed that I really enjoyed helping students when they were having issues getting their sites on the internet. So using tools like Heroku or using like a cloud provider. And so after Galvanize, I was pretty intentional about the next job I took. I took a job as a site reliability engineer at a company that works with a tool called Kubernetes. And I did that for about 3 years. And I got burned out at that job because I was there during the pandemic. I think a lot of us had that experience. And like, now I work at DigitalOcean, and it's a cool job for me because I do a lot of teaching. I give workshops, I give talks, I write tutorials, and I'm teaching on the topics that or the technology tools that I used at my last job. So it's cool. And I know that you work at Ford now, but if you don't work at Ford forever, like there's a lot of different kinds of tech jobs out there, and I like to highlight that. So I don't write code anymore. I don't ship anything into production, but I get to be technical and be an educator, and it's pretty cool. So, okay, I'm just gonna leave it at that. Empty questions.
After you finished your boot camp, Kim, how long do you think it took you to feel comfortable working in software?
That's a great question, and the answer is 4 years. So, okay, I do have a thing to share with you. I'm glad you asked that. So 3 takeaways. So you're going through this transformative experience, and the first takeaway is just it takes a long time. So I'll make this larger so you can see it. But your program is relatively short. I think it's like 3 months. But you're embarking on this huge transformative process where you're changing what you do for your career. You're changing like the way that you approach problems. You're changing your whole worldview. You're changing like who you are. And so don't expect for the transformation to be like done and over when you're done with this program. And so for me, it took teaching at Galvanize and then sort of switching into a different part of the tech industry. And then it took me like 2-3 years to actually feel like I was part of that industry. And part of it was my technical skills, but part of it was also just like having a network of people that I had known for a while. And I was like, okay, I like have a lot to learn, but I'm a person in the tech industry. Like I don't have to question that anymore. So 4 years for me. It's faster for some people. It's longer for some other people. But I would say if you want to be in the tech industry, like stick with it. It can take a while.
How hard was the learning curve when you first got in? Got started in the boot camp? Like
it was so hard. Oh my God. So I was not someone who had ever coded before. And even though I really liked like technology when I was a kid and a teenager, I didn't have like a whole lot of experience with the tools that build technology. So I remember in my boot camp, some people had come from like, they had already done some coding before, or they had worked at a tech company and they were designers. So they had seen the process of creating software, and I just hadn't seen any of that. And I just remember, especially like the first couple months of my boot camp, mine was 6 months long. I just remember being like in a lesson, it was about functions, and functions are really important in writing code. But I just remember being like, I understand that this is important because of the amount of time we're spending on it, but I have no idea, like, I don't actually know what's going on. So it took me a long time. Yeah, I guess I'm just hammering home on that message. It took me a long time. I just had to stick with it. And the nice thing about the program that you've got with Kyle is that, so my program was more traditional, where it was like, we have a calendar of topics that we cover and we move on whether or not people get it or not. And so for me, it was like, I guess I'll just have to come back to this in the future because it's the next week and we've moved on to a different topic.
Because it's the next week.
Yeah, I would say like also spiraling, like coming back to that is good. You'll naturally come back to it in your career. Yeah, it took me a long time.
I have two questions. First question, can you put the link to your tutorials into our chat?
Oh, yeah.
And what do you consider as forever? Because I feel like I've been at Ford forever. I've been here for 25 years.
Oh, wow.
What do I consider forever? That's a great question. So I have not been a professional for 25 years yet. So for me, forever was like 5 years. Yeah. Or like, just like, it took me 4 to 5 years to feel like I could actually like, it took me that long to be like, I'm not a teacher who transitioned into tech. Like I'm a developer, I'm a site reliability engineer. And so I appreciate the longer view. Definitely. And now I'm, the job market is so hot right now. And I am so sick of working for companies and schools that I'm starting to think about, okay, like how might I freelance or how might I do this on my own? Like how can I remain in the tech industry for a little bit longer? That's like the train of thought I've got right now. So this is a good segue into my second takeaway. So let me reshare my screen. So it takes a long time, it's the first one. I'm not quite sure how to phrase this, but like you're in like a really interesting spot in the evolution of the tech industry and the evolution of Ford in the way that like we as knowledge workers like think about work. And so let's see, what did I write down? I guess just like, it doesn't mean you have to like it, but just like appreciate where you're at. You're like pioneers in this new phase of work and this new phase at Ford, this new phase of like how we approach work. So I'll just say, appreciate the unprecedented time you're in. Yeah, I don't know where it's going to go, but you all are at the forefront, and I think that's pretty cool. So.
Hi, Kim. My name is Amp, and I have a quick question for you. Just looking back at your development through your career, what are some like really good habits that like you recognize now, like wow, like I'm so glad I did that, because you're still doing those same things like today?
Well, that's a good question. Thank you. So some habits that I have that have like served me well in my tech career. That's a great question. I'm trying to think. I guess one habit is, I'll just say like, I'm really good at giving instructions. So a lot of projects that you work on at work, you'll have a README file that in theory describes like, how do you set up the software on your computer? How do you work on it? And so one thing that I think I'm really good at is reading those and then fixing them up. And so that's been good for me because it helps me learn the project that I'm working on. And I don't know, I think people take for a lot of people that I've worked with who have been technical for a really long time, who have like computer science degrees or were coding when they were children, I think they take for granted how hard it can be to set up a project. And so I've come into a lot of situations where this person is like really good at writing code, but they can't describe how or why, or how, they can't help anyone else do that. And so that's a skill I've appreciated. And so to like tie that into the larger message I want you to take away is whatever you did before this program that you're in, or even whatever you did before Ford, like all those skills matter. So when I became a boot camp student, before I realized like what was going on, I was like, the chapter of my life where I was in education has ended. I will never use those skills again. Like I should have a funeral for those parts of me, and now I'm going to be a software developer. And that was so silly because the thing that makes me special, the thing that makes me a valuable employee to a lot of companies is that I have like this skill set that not a whole lot of people have. And so embrace whatever you did before. Like don't try to shut the door on it. So that's actually like the big one is being like, okay, I'm good at this. I have a lot of experience with this, and it's unique in the organizations that I work in. And so I think that's actually my biggest habit. And then from like a purely technical standpoint, in terms of keeping up with tech, I use Twitter lists. So I have Twitter lists that are Kubernetes specific, DevOps specific, and I kind of look at those throughout the day. And then I'll like listen to some podcasts because that's a way I like to take in information. And I just notice what projects or what concepts come up more than once, and then I'll go dig into those. And so that's something technically that's served me well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a good podcast recommendation, something we might be able to start listening to? I want to listen to one called Programming Throwdown that I enjoy, but yeah.
I'm not sure if it's being made anymore, but they have like 5 years of a back catalog. It's called Code Newbie, and it's for people who are new to writing code. So I highly recommend that podcast. Right now, part of my job is to actually be aware of trends in the industry and like be able to provide commentary on that. And so I like the Stack Overflow podcast. They just sort of chat about like whatever is going on, like in the tech zeitgeist. And then, oh boy, maybe Kyle, you can help me with this. What is Wes Foss and Scott Talinsky's podcast called?
Syntax.
That was a great JavaScript specific podcast that I liked. And Wes Foss and Scott Talinsky are both like famous JavaScript educators. So I can put those in the chat in just a moment. So Code Newbie, Stack Overflow, if you're curious about what's going on in like the tech industry, like trends, and then Syntax.
Awesome, thank you.
Hey, Kim, I'm Scott. So you mentioned that when you were doing your boot camp, for the first 2 or 3 months of it, you were kind of lost. What was the moment, or what changed, or what happened to make you have everything click to where you were at the point where you said, okay, I'm starting to understand this, I can get this? Yeah, was there a moment, was there a mindset shift or something?
I have terrible news. I never had that moment. So like one moment I had, it was with Kyle actually. He was like teaching me promises in JavaScript, and he was like, when it clicks, it's going to be so great. And I remember he showed me, and I was like, oh, that's it, huh? Like, it was not a satisfying click, I guess. So, yeah, for me, I think the moments when I've grown the most as a technologist is when I've had the opportunity to play with technology, where I'm not trying to submit something for work that has a deadline, when I really don't have a lot of expectations about what I want to get out of it. I just want to have, this experience of playing with the tool. And so those are the moments when I have the most aha moments. And one thing I get to do at my job, which is super cool, is I get to do Twitch live streams. Like, that company pays me to do that. So every Tuesday, I stream on the DigitalOcean Twitch channel. And it's just me doing exactly that, being like, I've heard about this thing. Let me go actually read some of the documentation and try to install it and try to play around with it. And so for me, that's been the most powerful. So it took me a long time. I think I had an expectation that one day I'd be like, I just get it and everything makes sense. And I never really had that. And so I had to come to terms with, okay, the way I have those experiences, it's a little more subdued for me. And it's just kind of like playing with technology.
You said you stream on Tuesdays?
I do. Yeah, Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern. I'll share like a list of stuff for Kyle to give you all when we're done.
Also, reminder, you're all in the Sika Discord, too.
I am.
FYI.
I too.
Get Duncan in there.
Other questions?
So going into this, you know, there's so many different programming languages that we can all learn. You can be a jack of all trades, or you could be a master of one. What's your recommendation for facing such a daunting task of I have 50,000 different languages I can learn, and I have to pick 6 that are going to be the ones, you know?
That's a good question. I would say to start, you just need one, and it almost doesn't matter. Like, I wouldn't start with C, but JavaScript, Python, Ruby, those are all good first languages. And when you're learning that first language, it's really hard. You're making all of these neural connections in your brain, creating all these pathways, and it is tough. But the good news is after you have some foundation with one language, once you start another one, then you have something to compare the new language to. So JavaScript was my first language. Right now I'm learning a language called Go. And so basically everything I do is okay, so this thing in Go is like a JavaScript object, but it's called a struct, or it's called a slice in Go. So I wouldn't necessarily not try to learn more than one language, but for me, I needed that one thing that was the mental model about what is a programming language, so I could point to it, and that makes it a lot better for me. I'm curious, after this program, what happens for you next? Are they congratulations, you're on a saw? Okay, don't know about it. Cool.
I think Kyle knows more than we do at this point.
Yeah, we were all told different things, so
we're all fired after this.
That's right.
Yeah, get out.
They listened to our classes and said, nah.
Okay, well that's cool. Well, that's a lot of uncertainty to be holding on to. So that's hard.
It does sound like we'll all be placed on a team based on how they assess our skills at the end, but it's kind of vague. A lot.
Well, it would be very silly for them to let you all go because you have so much knowledge of the company and the way that it operates right now. And you can't, there's no amount of training you can provide a new software engineer to understand what you all understand. So,
And they don't plan on letting us go, but they may send us back where we came from.
Well, in that case, then go get another job. Be thanks for the training, y'all. See you later.
Then we gotta pay them back money. But they won't do that. They won't do that to us. They don't want us back there either.
Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah, they're forcing us to stay with them for at least 2 years.
Okay. All right.
Well, good.
Question for you, Kim.
Go ahead, Ian.
It's kind of off topic, but what do you like to do for fun? I know you don't code 24/7. I mean, you got a life, right? So, what do you do for fun?
That's a great question. So I like to hang out with my friends. So I actually hang out with Kyle and Elise a fair amount. I like to bike ride in the summers. So I have a bike behind me. It's my gravel bike, and I have a mountain bike. And so those are some things I like to do. I try to visit my family. My parents, my younger sister and her family live 3 hours away from Denver, so I try to spend time with them. I do CrossFit. I'm just now getting back into that. After I had a home gym last winter, and going back to a gym now, so I like to work out. But honestly, I feel like a big part of my life right now is figuring out what are some of my new hobbies, or what are some of my new interests, because the pandemic has been really hard on me. It changed a lot of the way that I structured my life and got social interaction. So I don't know, I'm exploring new groups. I used to live in a suburb of Denver and I moved recently, so just like exploring new neighborhoods and honestly like figuring out who am I now, because I'm really, really different than I was 2 years ago. So that's my main hobby now, is being like, who am I?
And that's healthy, just because it's funny, like the stigma with folks in like the coding industry has been like, these guys live, or these men and women live off of like, pizza and Mountain Dew and they game all day. Like, no, like it's not that. Like these are real people, that have real interests. So it's refreshing to hear that, someone who's been in the industry for as long as you have, that you're doing things to further nurture yourself, and it's like an all-encompassing thing. It's just not one main focus of your life. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's important. And like, that's the thing I have to actively remember. Like a lot of people get into software engineering because that's what they love and that's what they do in their spare time. And that's not been true for me. And sometimes I get frustrated with myself because I could maybe go faster or know more if that was how I lived my life. But I just can't. And especially now that the pandemic has happened, I just don't have the cognitive energy after a work day to like look more at a computer or try to write more code. And so that's been a valuable lesson for me too. Like, how can I contain it in an 8-hour workday? And like, is my manager okay with that?
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Go for it, Sharon.
Thank you. So what does the very beginning stages of a new project look like when you're collaborating with a group? Who decides who does what, and how does that work?
That's a great question, and I'm going to tell you what I experienced at my last job, which is kind of like unique. I've never really like worked on a software project from the start, but at my last job, I worked at a consulting agency, and like small, medium-sized businesses would hire us, and we would build out like a new digital infrastructure for them. So they would say like, maybe we have everything running in an on-premise data center, or we have a digital infrastructure that's costing us too much money or something. So will you help us build that out? And so at that company, I worked on a small team, and we would talk with the company who had hired us and say like, hey, what do you want? Do you want your cloud infrastructure to be on Google? Do you want it to be on Microsoft Azure? Do you want it to be on AWS? Okay, now once we figure that out, like, are you trying to optimize for cost? Like, do you want this to be as low cost as possible? Or are you trying to optimize for speed and efficiency? And like, the cost doesn't matter. And so getting all those requirements from the customer, essentially. And then we had a pattern of how to build out digital infrastructure. And so we would apply those patterns. So we'd say like, okay, so this person's like super cost conscious. So we're going to set up like the minimum amount of things for them. We're going to make sure there's a lot of scaling built in. So when they get more traffic, things scale up. And then when they have less traffic, things scale down. So they're not spending as much money. And then just like a lot of communication with the customer. Every customer, even though we had those templates, essentially, every customer has some weird thing that is hard to implement. So then we'd be like, okay, what's the weird things this customer has that we have to figure out? And then we do that. But everything we did was based in code, which is kind of a new thing in like the operations world. A lot of times it was like click in the web console, like I'm going to spin up this server, click. Or I'm going to, add this database onto it, click. Or someone would do that from the command line, but only they knew what they were doing. But there's this idea called infrastructure as code, where you actually have Git repositories that are stored in like a version control system like GitHub, where all of that stuff gets defined in code. And so that's what allowed the teams I worked on to like pass it off to one another. You could actually see like, okay, Kim made that change and then production came down, so let's see what happened there. But yeah, that's what it was for me at that job. And then at this job that I'm currently at, my projects are more like I'm developing a workshop for the company for the first time. And so I'm actually doing a lot of like research and with customers and saying like, what do you all want to learn? Like, what would be the most beneficial for you? And then I'm like writing the learning goals for that, and then we'll eventually develop the workshop. Or I'm writing a blog post right now, and I want to have really good code samples in the blog post, but I'm talking about this new technology that I don't know very well, so I've had to spend a lot of time this week reading the documentation and like asking questions, and eventually I've like written the non-code part of the blog post, but I'm gonna need to like add the code blocks into it. Earlier this week, so we do live streaming, that's part of my job, but since the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, like we've had a communications blackout with our stuff like that. But I had to like, this actually made me mad that I had to do this, but I had to like be like, hey, are we not live streaming this week? And I had to ask like a bunch of people and figure that out. So I do a lot of, it's all technical, I think. That's why I was like, you guys are technical. If you're working with DOS, you're technical. May not be the tech you want to be working with, but like I'm applying the same problem solving process to all of these different things I'm being asked to do. But that's why I like being a developer advocate. Like just working on code problems is probably not something I'd be very good at. So yeah.
Thank you.
Kyle, do you have any questions that would prompt me to say something you want me to say?
Oh yeah, I should do that. All right, while I'm thinking of that, let's get 2 more learner questions.
This is a pretty bad question, but what's your cat's name?
Oh, I love this question. I have 2 cats. One is named Bowie, after David Bowie, and one is named Bauman. And they're both black cats, so I was like, okay, I went way overboard on this thought process. I was like, I want like a space theme for these cats. So David Bowie's last album was called Black Star, so that's why I named one of them Bowie. And then the other's named Bauman, and she's named after Katie Bauman, who's a computer scientist who, do you remember a few years ago, it was like, we got the first image of a black hole. She helped develop the algorithm that like pieced together that image of the black hole. So that's where the cat is named after. And I could have named them like, I don't know. I like also when cats are named like broccoli. I'm like, why didn't I just name them something like that?
One of my cats is named Moose, so I went that route.
Right, yeah, exactly. Like that's a great name for a pet.
I got a black cat named Shady, so no
nice.
Creativity there.
Excellent. I mean, my first cat when I was 3, I named it Kitty, so I guess I'm stepping up in the world.
We had a dog last year he died, but his name was Bacon.
Aww,
nice.
Bacon.
But
did you ever fix the IEP? Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
Did you ever someone? Oh, go.
So Sharon, then Julie.
Did you have a third takeaway?
That's a good question. Let's see. It takes a long time. Appreciate the unprecedented time you're in. I guess the third takeaway is this is maybe not super fair, but like you have no idea how special this program and like your team is. Well, maybe you do because you've been working at Ford for a long time, but it's special what you're doing. And like I was asking Kyle, like, hey, is there any other company that's done a boot camp quite like this that we know about? And it sounds like no. So you are I guess the theme of like being the trailblazers in some way, or like you're doing something new, and that's really cool. So I guess that's my third takeaway is I think this is a special group, and once you leave, then you'll be like, oh my god, that group was so special. Like when I worked with Kyle, we worked in the basement of his building and ran this wacky program, and I knew it was special then, but every day now I'm like, oh, I miss the basement. I miss the basement so bad. So yeah, enjoy it while you can, and then this group of people is going to be so important to you, probably for the rest of your life. And so be kind to one another and work together. And I read through Kyle's like principles about the program, and like they're very simple to read, but they have come from like a lifetime of Kyle being an educator and running programs like this, and so those principles are like really, really cool. There are not very many education institutions like traditional like universities, colleges, or boot camps that have that perspective on the program. So yeah, just you guys are lucky.
Tim, I had a quick.
Hold on, Julie first. Oh, Julie first, and then you, and then I came up with a good one, Kim. Go for it.
Okay, cool. Julie, Sean, and then Kyle.
No, mine was just more from someone who signed IEPs in 3 different states for her kid. Did you ever get anywhere with that? Because Colorado was the worst for me for my kid.
Oh, you mean
terrible, like bulky and awful to
yeah.
sign. So I was just wondering if you ever went anywhere with that idea that kind of
like to make them better.
Yeah.
No, unfortunately. I think at my last teaching job, I had like 30 students, which is a lot, and I had to make those documents for all of them. And like on the one hand, I understand why the documents exist as they are. Like they become law. They like are there to protect the student in theory, but it's so difficult to write them, and it's so difficult to work meaningfully with parents and like the student's general education teacher and all these other like people who are in the child's life. So no, I just burned out, which happens to a lot of special ed teachers, and I yeah.
Mad respect, because I couldn't. No, I couldn't do it.
Tennessee's not much better.
No.
Yeah. But it does seem like it's more about the paperwork than the actual implementation, but
absolutely, unfortunately. Sean.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, what was going from teaching specifically to getting into the tech world? What was the biggest life change that you noticed outside of like your program and outside of work, and which life change outside of work in the program do you wish that you picked up sooner?
That's a good question. There's 2 things that come to mind. One is I made a lot more money, and so I actually just didn't have to worry about money in the same way when I was in tech, or it's currently now, in the way that I did when I was a teacher. I really had to be mindful of like my spending habits and be very intentional about what I was saving for, and I had to work extra jobs to like meet financial goals. And so I'm still like a frugal person. I still like think about money, but you know, I can go to the grocery store and not worry. I could just kind of buy whatever I want, and that was a big deal for me. So that was one. And I wish it wasn't so, because I work so much harder as a teacher than I do now. And then the second one was the physical change. When I was a teacher, I was standing a lot, and I would walk to different classrooms to pick up students, and I would go outside for recess duty. And my body and mind had a really hard time adjusting. I don't think I'm still adjusted, like just the more sedentary lifestyle of a person who works on the computer all day. So I have a standing desk, I'm standing now, I try to go for walks, but I really miss the time when walking was a part of my job in a way that I didn't even think about it, because now I have to be like, go for a walk, stand up, and you know, I have back problems and hip problems, and part of it is just getting older, but part of it is like I am at a computer all day long, and so that's been I think maybe the hardest transition for me. Yeah.
All right, Kim. So I'm going to ask you for least useful and most useful mindsets, attitudes, beliefs that you can have as a student in a program like this.
Least useful and most useful. Good question. I'm going to start with most useful, which is you're in this for the long haul, or it takes a long time. So if you are really struggling with something and maybe you like get the green check mark, but it's still bothering you, like you'll encounter it again. And so think about a longer timeline, like 5-year, 10-year, 25-year timeline. Like this is a career shift. Yeah. And like, what is it? Is it 2 months, this program?
4.
3 months? 4. Okay. That's like nothing. And so to like, you be a software engineer at the end of it, like you'll have some of those skills, but there's still a lot of like behaviors and habits that just take time. Like there's no amount of like cramming or like boot camping that will get you there. So it takes time, I guess, is the most useful mindset. Least useful mindset. Now I'm thinking about bad students.
That's exactly what I want you to think about.
Bad adult students, not bad children's students. I think least useful is going it on your own, being like, I don't care about these group projects, or I'm not going to ask for help or offer help. Like that's a really harmful mindset. It isolates you from the group. It actually like cuts you off from a lot of really rich learning opportunities. And this one's super duper specific. When it comes time, you need to learn how to write good Markdown. The only time I had like a real fight with a student at Galvanize was this guy. I like sent him back. I was grading one of his submissions and I was like, dude, your Markdown is terrible. Like you gotta fix it. And he was like, I don't need to learn how to write Markdown. And I was like, yeah, you do. So like Markdown is how you format code documents like you would with Microsoft Word or Google Drive or Google Docs with like headings, but you just do it with pound signs essentially. And you can format documents that way, but I don't know. Writing good Markdown is something I take a lot of pride in. I mentioned it as being something I'm good at earlier. And so, yeah. I guess the like bigger message to pull out of that is like, it's not just about how you write code. It's about how you show up to work. It's about how you interact with your colleagues. It's about how you understand the project that you're working on. It's about being kind to yourself and others. And like, for me, a well-formatted document that I can read and helps me get a project set up and running is really valuable. And like more valuable to me than like, I don't necessarily look at the code and be like, oh, this is beautifully written code. Like, it doesn't matter if you can't use the freaking software. So, yeah.
True story. That guy. So one of the weird occupational hazards of this job is you get a lot of emails a year later from someone who's like, man, I was an asshole in that program. I'm so sorry. But like, it's so stressful that like you really do just see everybody at their worst. Like the program really reflects how you handle pressure over a sustained period of time. And so like, I'm very used to that. And so if after this program finishes up and you're in your new career and everything starts settling down, you go, who was I in that program? I got one of those from that guy. It was like, God, I was just mean to you guys. It's like, yes, you were.
Yeah. And also like you are under a lot of stress. So like, if you are a jerk, like for some people, that's how you handle stress. Like apologize and, try to do better.
Cool. All right, let's do one more question for Kim.
Someone who hasn't asked a question yet.
I like it.
Okay, Sarah, I'm looking at you. It can be anything. It can be about. It doesn't have to be about technology.
I guess something that I struggle with is like, I don't want to ask for help because it might make me look like I'm not doing well. What would you be like your recommendation to try to overcome something like that?
That's a great question. I feel that way too. So whenever I ask for help, I like to document what I have tried before asking for help. So sometimes it's long, sometimes it's short. So like a short example would be like, hey, I'm like trying to find this thing. Here's where I looked. Can somebody help me, like point me in the right direction? So that's one. Sometimes with like big technical projects or problems, I've like written like long paragraphs of text being like, here's what I tried. Here's the documentation I read. Here's the actual like code block that I ran that didn't work. So I I try to just show people like, hey, I did try some other stuff before asking you. I also don't think I have a reputation for asking questions without trying first. So just be thoughtful about that.
Awesome. So, hey, how about we have a big round of applause for our guest speaker, Kim Schlesinger.
Thank you. So I'm going to send Kyle some information. And also, DigitalOcean has this great mascot called Sammy the Shark, and he's very cute. But I'm going to include my work email address in the stuff that I send Kyle. And if you send me an email and just say, hey, I'm from the Ford cohort, and if you give me your address, so like your mailing address, including your zip code, I will send you some Sammy the Shark stickers. And they're very great. He's very cute. So yeah, please send me an email. If you have questions about anything, I'm trying to keep an eye on the queue in the Sika Discord. But if you have questions after the fact, or if in 6 months you're like, oh, I have a question for Kim, please reach out. Reach out on Discord. You can reach out on LinkedIn. You'll have my work email, but I'm terrible at email. So except for these sticker pack requests, these I will keep an eye out for. But yeah, please keep in touch, ask questions. I think it's very hard to change careers like this, and I really respect all of you. And since I've done it, I like to provide support, and I love doing like 30-minute Zoom meetings with people just to talk career stuff or do code stuff. Or if you ever get interested in more the side of the tech industry that I work in, which is like systems and operations, like I like to talk about that too. So keep in touch, I guess, is all I'm saying, if you want to. And that's the beauty of the guest speaker program. Some people, probably like felt a lot of resonance with what I was saying. Some people maybe not so much. You're gonna have someone different next week. Like you're gonna have Berto on. Berto's a fucking genius. Berto didn't have any problem learning how to code, and like that's true for some of you, and that's totally cool. But like, yeah, like it's the guest speaker program is designed to be diverse, so that you have at least one moment where you're like, I relate with that. So.
Excellent. Cool. So let's break. Go out and learn some stuff. Schedule's coming out soon. Cheers.
Thank you, Kim.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye.